Welcome back, and now to the news in detail. We start from Somalia, where at least 76 people have been killed after a car bomb detonated at a busy checkpoint in Mogadishu. Health officials said 51 others were wounded and the death toll will rise. Police said the blast targeted a tax collection center during the rush hour in the capital. Mogadishu Mayor Omar Mohammed said 2 Turkish nationals and several university students were among those killed. No group has claimed the responsibility for the attack. Moving on to Afghanistan, where 10 soldiers have been killed after the Taliban attacked a military post in southern province of Helmand. In a statement, the military said 4 others were wounded in the attack as 16 troops were stationed at the outpost. The Taliban have claimed the responsibility for the attacks, saying they killed 26 soldiers. Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid said a sizable amount of weapons were seized by the group's fighters. Now moving on. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's BJP is doing in India what Adolf Hitler's Nazi party did in Germany. Speaking at a ceremony in Peshawar, Khan says the recently enacted citizenship law is meant to marginalize Muslims in India. The Prime Minister says India is committing human rights violations in occupied Kashmir. He said all communities in India are protesting against the contentious law. Khan says India may resort to a false flag operation in Azad Kashmir to divert the world's attention from its domestic chaos. In India, the opposition Congress party has held protests against the controversial citizenship law in Mumbai on its foundation day. Thousands of Congress members and supporters took to the streets of the Indian financial hub against the anti-Muslim legislation. Earlier, former party President Rahul Gandhi compared the law to the ruling BJP's demonetization policy, saying the whole nation will face a great loss because of it. The Islamic organization Tawheed Jamaat is also holding a demonstration against the law in the state of Tamil Nadu. Meanwhile, the Indian government has registered a case against 10,000 students of Aligarh Muslim University for protesting. 27 people have died across India in protests against the new act. Meanwhile, a police officer from the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh has been caught on film telling Muslims protesting against the citizenship law to go to Pakistan. In a video, the superintendent of police can be seen threatening Muslims with extremely communal and threatening remarks. The officer called on the Muslim community to leave the country if they want to praise the neighboring nation. Meanwhile, Indian mobile operators are losing over $350,000 every hour because of the suspension of the services. The Indian Cellular Operators Association said mobile internet was ordered shut in at least 18 of Uttar Pradesh districts yesterday. The Indian government has repeatedly shut down communication services in cities including Delhi, Lucknow and Agra in the last 3 weeks to curb the protests. Pakistan's iconic revolutionary poets are inspiring the countrywide protests in India against the controversial citizenship law. Students of Indian Institute of Technology's Kanpur campus sang Faz's famous "We Will Witness" during a protest. In an interview, a student of Delhi's Jawaharlal Nehru University sang Habib Jalib's iconic poem, "Such a dark dawn, I do not know, I will not own." Disapproving the use of poems, the Hindutva nationalists have filed complaints and cases against the protesters. In another development, refusing to put up with further caste discrimination and torture, 3,000 Dalits from the Indian state of Tamil Nadu have decided to convert to Islam. Dalits are considered the lowest caste and untouchables in Hinduism and have faced abuse in the Indian subcontinent for centuries. General Secretary of Dalit Rights Outfit, Tamil Puligal Kachi, said that they have had enough and will convert next month. He said his community will no longer live under suppression and racial abuse. All converting Dalits belong to 5 districts: Erode, Coimbatore, Tirupur, Namakkal and Salem of Tamil Nadu. Moving on to Iraq, where one U.S. civilian contractor has been killed in a rocket attack on a military base in Kirkuk. In a statement, the U.S.-led coalition says the attack on the K-1 base wounded several American service members and Iraqi personnel. It said Iraqi security forces are leading the response and investigation. No group has claimed the responsibility for the attack yet. U.S. interests in Iraq have been hit by a flurry of rocket attacks since the October late, prompting Washington to call on Baghdad to protect them. Washington has blamed Iran-backed paramilitary groups for these attacks. Meanwhile, protesters have supported President Barham Salih's rejection of Iran-backed Assad al-Idani's nomination for Prime Minister of Iraq. Demonstrators called for an independent candidate to be nominated as the country's new Prime Minister. Earlier, President Salih said he would rather resign than accept a candidate already rejected by the protest movement. Meanwhile, Iran-supported groups slammed Iraq's president, saying his decision was made at the behest of the U.S. The group said the president had violated the constitution by refusing to carry out his duties. Around 460 people have been killed and 25,000 injured since anti-government demonstrations broke out in October. In Syria, nearly 250,000 people have fled Idlib over the last 2 days amid bombardment by government and the Russian warplanes. The United Nations says the mass displacement has left the Marayat al-Numan region almost empty. On Thursday, the U.S. president urged Tehran, Damascus and Moscow to stop killing people in Idlib. He said Turkey is working hard to stop the ongoing carnage in the region. Idlib is the last major stronghold of rebels fighting the government forces since 2015. The UN General Assembly has approved a resolution condemning human rights abuses against Myanmar's Rohingya Muslims and other minorities. The world body voted 134 to 9 with 28 abstentions in favor of the resolution. The bloc called on Myanmar's government to take measures to combat incitement of hatred against the minorities in Rohingya, Rakhine, Kachin and Shan states. The UN condemned abuses against the minorities, including arbitrary arrests, torture, rape and deaths in detention. The body has adopted an over $3 billion budget that for the first time includes funding for the investigation of war crimes in Syria and Myanmar. The Rohingya crisis exploded in 2017 when Myanmar's military launched a campaign against the minorities in Rakhine. Malaysia says it will neither refuse asylum to Uyghur Muslims nor will it extradite them. Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad said they should be granted the right to seek asylum in another country. The Malaysian Prime Minister was of the opinion the Uyghur are not fairly protected. Earlier, China had slammed the U.S. House of Representatives for passing a bill requiring the Trump administration to toughen its response to Xinjiang. China's foreign ministry said the bill wantonly smears Beijing's efforts to eliminate and combat extremism. In Hong Kong, hundreds of protesters have gathered in Shong Shui against the government. Police arrested 15 people and fired pepper spray to disperse the demonstrations. Protesters also gathered on a footbridge between the mall and railway stations, where they kicked the mainland visitors' shopping bags and suitcases. The protests followed days of demonstrations and confrontations with police over Christmas. Hong Kong has been battered by months of massive protests ignited by a controversial extradition bill. In Hawaii, the remains of 6 people have been found after a helicopter crashed on the island of Kauai. The aircraft, which was carrying 7 passengers, went missing in a remote area at the end of an air tour. Rescue officials said there is no sign of survivors as the search for the final passenger will resume today. The Coast Guard said steep terrain, low visibility, choppy seas and rain hampered the search for the wreckage. They said the victims' identities have not been released yet, pending notifications for the next of kin. Kauai, Hawaii's 4th largest island, is mountainous with jagged cliffs and tropical rainforests. In France, trade union leaders vow to continue their strike that has crippled transport services in Paris for the past 3 weeks. The strike against President Emmanuel Macron's pension reforms has entered its 24th day. Union leaders have accused Prime Minister Edouard Philippe of not being true to his word, who had earlier said he wants no confrontation with protesters. The longest transport strike in France lasted for 28 days, also over Christmas in 1986 and early 1987. Macron's proposed policy has angered workers as it will raise the retirement age and reduce post-retirement benefits. Russia, China and Iran have kicked off their first joint naval drill in the northern part of Indian Ocean. The 4-day exercise comes at a time of heightened tensions between Iran and the US since Washington withdrew from the 2015 nuclear deal last year. The Iranian Navy said the message of this exercise is peace and security through cooperation and unity. Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said Iran has long stated its readiness to work with its neighbors to secure the Persian Gulf. Earlier, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said the drills will deepen the exchange and cooperation between the three countries' navies. Russia says its new hypersonic weapon of intercontinental range has become operational following years of tests. Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu informed President Vladimir Putin of the inclusion of the first missile unit equipped with the Avangard hypersonic glide. The military claimed the Avangard is capable of flying 27 times faster than the speed of sound. Earlier, President Putin said Avangard can penetrate current and future missile defense systems. He said not a single country possesses hypersonic weapons, let alone continental range hypersonic weapons. More stories to follow right after a short break. Welcome back. The United Nations says 3 staff members of UNHCR were abducted in Democratic Republic of Congo's eastern province of South Kivu. UN's mission in DR Congo said the suspected Mai Mai militiamen attacked a refugee camp in the town of Baraka. It said militias captured a Senegalese office assistant and 2 Congolese security officers. The government forces and police have started an investigation. The UN mission has suspended its operation in the province. Uruguay's anti-narcotics authorities say they have seized a record haul of 4.4 tons of cocaine worth more than $1 billion. Naval and custom officers confiscated the drugs in a joint operation in the port of Montevideo. Officials said the drugs had been hidden in 4 soy flour containers destined for Lomé, the capital of Togo in West Africa. They said the cocaine came to light when scanners at the port showed anomalies in the containers. The authorities have called it the biggest setback for the drug traffickers in the country's history. In Australia, uncontrolled bushfires are still burning after ripping through state's prominent wine region and around the country's largest city, Sydney. Hazardous smoke blanketed Sydney, heightening public anger and raising political pressure on the government to do more to curb climate change. This report has the details.
Australian wildfires are threatening Sydney's water supplies ahead of a heat wave as the authorities scramble to protect water plants. The authorities are focusing to protect pumping stations, pipes, and other infrastructures from intense bushfires surrounding Sydney. Temperatures rose above 40 degrees Celsius in parts of South Australia, marking the start of a new wave of heat in the continent's south. The state's ambulance service said they have attended to hundreds of patients with heat-related conditions since December.
We're very focused on trying to bring that fire under control, prioritising the threat to life and property, but we're also very mindful about the implications of fire burning in the catchment area, what that means when it does rain again, what sort of runoff will there be, what sort of siltation will there be, ash, soil, all that sort of stuff getting into the waterways.
Temperatures in New South Wales state are forecast to head back towards 40 degrees Celsius next week, fueling fires near Warragamba Dam. The dam is at lesser than half the capacity amid prolonged droughts. It provides water to about 80% of Sydney's 5 million residents.
We are seeing the temperatures starting to rise over the coming days. We're seeing this heat wave starting to move across New South Wales again. That's going to bring not just the heat out of the centre of Australia, we're going to see the temperatures up into the low to mid-40s across a lot of areas.
The bushfires have destroyed over 4 million hectares across the country, dwarfing the terrain burned by fierce fires in California during 2019.
In Mexico, a sheltered home for the Central American migrants in the northern city of Ciudad Juarez has been temporarily closed due to a chickenpox outbreak. Mexican authorities say 72 people, including 69 children, have been diagnosed with the virus. More about the viral infection in this report.
The chickenpox outbreak is the biggest epidemic eruption in Ciudad Juarez since the introduction of Trump's migrant protection protocols, also known as Remain in Mexico policy. Around 800 people in the facility awaiting their U.S. court hearings are at the risk of getting infected. Most of those infected feel unwell with symptoms like blister-like rashes, fevers, and fatigue, but some people have developed serious complications.
We can't isolate them completely, because they are families. So there are children who are 2, 3, or 4 years of age who have chickenpox. So we have an area especially assigned to children who already have chickenpox, and they are receiving proper medical attention with all necessary care.
A federal official, Juan Carlos, said the virus was spread by a Honduran girl returned to Mexico by the U.S. government.
We have suspended the entry of new migrants who are returned by the United States due to the chickenpox outbreak we have at the shelter. Once controlled, more will be able to enter.
The shelter, which is run by Mexico's federal government, has not commented on the situation yet.
In Germany, the Baltic island of Krems has become a research home for deadly animal diseases. The Friedrich Loeffler Institute tests the world's most dangerous viruses on animals to develop vaccines that could save lives. What about the research center in this report?
The research institute, Reims Island, is the oldest center for the study of viruses in the world. Dozens of animals are deliberately infected here with viruses as part of the research to monitor the effects of diseases. There are 89 laboratories and 163 stables.
So we really are the Alcatraz for viruses, a kind of prison for viruses. We do everything possible to ensure they do not spread.
There are between 80 and 100 large animals on the island, including alpacas, boars, cows, goats, and sheep. The researchers said when the animals get too sick, they are put down so as not to let them suffer.
Our biggest task is working out preparations for an outbreak. We try to investigate everything that is possible without animal testing. Nothing goes into the animal that I could answer in cell culture.
The government has invested some $334 million in the institute since 2008. There is no installation like it in Europe, although there are similar facilities in Australia and Canada.
In the United States, a giant New Year's Eve crystal ball has arrived at Times Square in the New York City. The geodesic sphere features 192 newly designed Waterford crystal triangles. What about the ball in this report?
Every year, Waterford Crystal, owned by Fiskars Group, designs and creates a series of new crystal triangles for the ball. This year's design features 3 pineapples to represent the gift of goodwill.
Now, goodwill and hospitality is very synonymous with the pineapple going back to colonial times. So it is celebrating hospitality for centuries, and that's what it's all about today.
Countdown Entertainment President Jeffrey Strauss says the Times Square New Year's Eve ball is the largest crystal ball in the world.
I can't think of a better way to ring in 2020. That ball that we'll all watch is over 12 feet in diameter, it has over 32,000 LEDs, and it weighs nearly 6 tons.
More than 1 million people are expected to crowd the Times Square to watch the crystal ball countdown to the new year.
Russia's Gazprom says it has paid $2.9 billion to Ukraine's Naftogaz to settle a long-running dispute over transit fees for gas. Gazprom spokeswoman said the payment has been done in accordance with the decision of the Stockholm Arbitration Court. Last year's ruling by the Stockholm Court was a major stumbling block to agreeing on a new gas transit deal between Moscow and Kiev. The Russian gas giant previously rejected the claim, but President Vladimir Putin said Russia wanted to find a solution. Last week, Moscow and Kiev signed a preliminary deal on the transit of Russian gas to Europe via Ukraine after months of difficult talks. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has unveiled the country's first homebred automobile prototype. Speaking at the launch ceremony, President Erdogan said the move will realize the country's long-time dream. What about the car in this report?
The new car Tog will be available in the market in 2022. The electric car will have 5 models with 170,000 units produced in a year. The project is expected to cost over $3.5 billion in over 13 years. Erdogan said Turkey wants it to become a global brand.
We are preparing our country for the future with this car project, together with its design, battery and charging stations. There are very few countries which are capable of doing this in the world. By entering the field of electric cars from the very beginning, Turkey is moving ahead of everyone.
Turkey is already a big exporter of cars made domestically by Ford, Fiat Chrysler, Renault, Toyota and Hyundai.
Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.